I would like to welcome everyone to quarter three, Metrics That Matter. If you've joined us before, you know that we've done this. This is our third round of Metrics That Matter. And it's just a time for the four of us to get together. We were doing this and, kind of meeting and talking about what was going on in the industry and decided, this is a great conversation for the industry to get to participate in. And so we're just kind of inviting you into our living rooms or our homes as we go through this Zoom call. We've met earlier today and talked about some things that we think are going on. And I think we have some great insights to share with you. And I thought we'd start today with just talking about what we've seen in Q3 and what we think that practices need to be looking for because of the results that we've seen in Q3. And Chris, I'd love to start with you today.
Yeah, thanks, Marla. Great to be with this group again. I think before we dive into just the ortho only, just as you look at, what's happening economically, there's some headwinds. And I think we all feel that, we all know that, but specifically, right now coming out of Q3 in September, student loan repayments have really had a 3-year hiatus. They started charging interest in September, and the first payments will start to be due in October. That's $1.5 trillion, which is the biggest consumer debt that anybody has, except for mortgage debt. And mortgage debt is $12 trillion for the U.S. economy. So it's going to be a big payment. The estimates are $250 to $500 a month, which is 1 or 2 or maybe 3 monthly orthodontic payments, depending on how you charge things out. So, that's coming, and I think that's something you need to be aware of, and so forth. We've also had, continuing interest rate increases. It's now 8% for a 30-year mortgage. Only 24 months ago, that was at 3.5%. So is the mortgage rate hikes over? It appears it's close to over, depending on how things go, but we're looking at maybe a 1/4 point hike in November or December Fed meeting. And then I think we will see a cut, but it won't be till this, mid-year next year. So everything's pushed out a little bit from what I thought at the beginning of the year. It's going to be, continued consumer difficulty, in my opinion. When we start looking at the ortho data, the third quarter wasn't terrible. We were kind of flat on production, up on collections because of fee increases, and flat on starts, but September was not good. And I think that was fairly universal for folks. The gauge data showed a minus 10% in starts in September versus prior year. OrthoFi data showed a minus 6% in same-store growth, which were both records for the year. You look at the whole year though, and we're still not bad. We're flat on production. We're kind of flat on collections, and we're a little bit down in starts. So my message is, when you look at 24 spending, plan on spending in 24 what you spend in 23, because I think the production is going to be roughly flat. So that's not a huge negative, but you're not going to be able to spend more. And then once we get that first rate decrease next year sometime, things will start to take off again, in my opinion. So that's kind of where I think we are. We looked at the October numbers briefly. They're not super bad. They're not super good. And so I think I'll call that a win. But that's kind of the global look at things.
I think we need a win, Chris.
Yeah.
Shannon, would love to hear your thoughts on what you're seeing.
Yeah, absolutely. So when I looked at the data, I really kind of honed in on kind of what we're seeing. We're seeing observation patients seen is down, and that's really interesting because when we kind of see, our new patients start to trickle because of consumer behaviors, we should be able to get those patients that are in our observation programs back in, and we're down about 5% on that. And really, we kind of dive in and wonder why. Is it because patients are waiting, they're doing that delay, knowing that their child might start, or is it because they're going somewhere else where they could get cheaper treatment? But really making sure that TCs are honing in on that observation and recall bucket, and really having a lot of touches with that patient. If you're marketing that that you are having, extended payments or limited extended payment options, or if you're marketing affordable treatment options, make sure that you're specifically targeting that observation and recall patient with that touch to let them know that you are offering affordable treatment options. We don't want anybody to cut their fees, but the consumer needs to understand that that there are affordable options out there. The other thing I would say that limited treatment options are down, and I think Chris and Oliver are going to touch on this in a minute. Kind of when we see SDC shut down, that number should actually be up. We should be, if you're targeting to adults for retreats, definitely kind of honing in on that and specifically make sure that you're looking at that patient. So if you're doing retreats and you're offering limited options that are not as expensive, make sure that you're, marketing directly to that consumer as well.
And Shannon, what are you seeing with phase 2? I think that we had talked a little bit about that.
Yes, phase 2 is down as well. And I think Oliver and I touched on that. Is that because the same thing? Are people just thinking, well, I don't want to go out and spend a bunch of money on that second phase. I just want to wait a little bit, or do their teeth look good enough and they're, not going to go into that. But again, making sure that you're really having those touches with those patients that have already been in your office is really important because, I think, as Chris said, for the next 3 quarters, the challenge is going to get consumers to come in because they are tightening their purse strings. So honing in on all of that is going to be important for the next few months.
Right. So Oliver, would love to hear your thoughts on Q3 and what practices need to be watching.
Yeah, so love everything that Chris and Shannon have been saying about the overall market. My observations, again, I'm going to continue to sound this horn, is I think it's clear from the gauge data and from our data that the market is dealing us a blow of roughly 3 to 4 to 5% in demand, right? If you look at exams, if you look at whether it's adult exams or kid exams are actually flat or a little bit up. But if you look at adult exams and overall exams, they're sort of flat or down a little bit. Starts are down about 3 to 3.5% overall, and that's great. But if you look deeper, there is an outlier in this mix that to me signals that we are that a little bit of this is self-inflicted, because if you look at the child starts and fixed appliance starts and even adult fixed appliance starts, they're down a lot less. The segment that is acutely down and close to 11% is adult aligners, and even though the adult exams is only down about 5%, the adult aligners is down 11%. And the only reason why that is that most practices are trying to require a minimum down that covers the lab fee. And that is a non-starter with all of the economic headwind that Chris has been talking about. And if you then now stack a $250 to $500 loan repayment payment, that's essentially sales prevention. And so I like to couple that also with limited treatment, because limited treatment should also be targeting adults. And if you're using aligners for those treatment also, you're likely, inflicting that same damage to yourself. So, we're constantly preaching intelligent flexibility and offering the patients that need it lower downs and trying to get higher downs from the patients that can give you higher downs so that you can net the right average down payment. That is my absolute recommendation, because if the adult aligner starts were more in line with everything else, we'd be closer to flat versus down all up 3 to 4%.
Yes, and OrthoFi is certainly a way to offer flexible payments to your patients. And so with that, I realized that I didn't even introduce the people that we have, the experts we have speaking with us today. So in case you don't know us, Chris Bentson from Bentson Copple Associates and Shannon Patterson also. Oliver is with OrthoFi, and I'm also with OrthoFi. So just a little break there to introduce us. And I want to move on. This is some great conversation, and I know the industry is a lot of good points that the industry is thinking about, but I want to talk specifically about what's going on in the industry for a minute as well. One thing couple of big things that have happened. I've heard of, some rounds of layoffs in our industry, and then also the news about SDC. So would just like to give each of you a chance to comment on those two things.
Yeah, I'll kick that off, Marla. Thanks, and thanks for the introduction. I think layoffs, even outside our industry, are happening. They're happening in Greensboro, North Carolina. I think they're happening across the country. But when you look at, on top of what Oliver just said, you got adult starts with aligners down, and I agree with his analysis. Is because we're not being flexible enough with initial payments and monthly payments, probably, and that's why OrthoFi is such a strong tool. But when you look at how are the suppliers of aligners reacting to that, 2 months ago we had some layoffs at ULab. We've had some layoffs at ClearCorrect. This month we've had some layoffs at Align. When you look at the OSOs and the DSOs, they're also struggling to have same-store sales growth, and 30% of their starts, plus or minus, are with aligners. They're trimming some costs in different places. So there's layoffs going on inside the orthodontic industry. The one company that's not laying off anybody right now, and probably the hottest growth company, is Digital Braces, with the handful of folks that do that. So and they're growing at double digits. But for sure, the layoffs are happening. Just jumping on top of what Oliver was saying about, I love that term, intelligent flexibility. I hadn't heard that before, but that's really the core technology of letting or thesis of letting the patient decide how they want to pay. When we looked at the collectively, the four of us, at the Gauge data and the OrthoFi data, what we found is there's a decrease in the number of paid in fulls happening this year. There's a slight decrease in the down payments happening this year. But when you look at OrthoFi, they call it a scattergram, but while their down payments on average are the same as we see in Gauge, the flexibility that they offer within that is really broad. And so I think it's more than just saying, I'm going to be more flexible with my down payment. Instead of $850, I'm going to make it $750. That doesn't get you there. You've got to be more flexible than that. And so I really like that came out in our discussion.
Yeah, I like that too, Chris. Thanks for pointing that out. And you did mention the layoffs. Oliver, I'd love to hear your thoughts on the Smile Direct Club situation.
Yeah, so I think Shannon's going to slam on this too, but I mean, this connects to limited treatment starts should be up, right? If all these patients are going to be left at the altar mid-treatment, we don't know how their clinical treatments are going to be managed if, in fact, Smile Direct Club completely folds. But you should expect that there are going to be a lot of patients that need treatment in this capacity. But these are patients that chose that modality because it is far less expensive and because they don't have $5,000 or $6,000. And so as a practice, you need to wrap your head around the fact that you need levels of service to accommodate patients that want about $3,000 worth of correction. And the great thing is there is a huge ball of market out there. And with Smile Direct Club folding, that is a huge opportunity if you choose to accept that mission. So, from the Mission Impossible, your mission, if you choose to accept it, is take advantage of this opportunity. Do not let it go, because if you don't take it, the Candids of the world, there will be another Smile Direct Club. There will be others that will snatch up that segment of the market. It is our market. Let's have it.
Yeah, and Shannon, I know you are in and out of practices probably more than the rest of us, and you're also speaking quite a bit. So I would love to hear your thoughts on what you're hearing practices say about offering limited treatment. Is it catch and hold?
Some people are and some people aren't. And I think that, what Smile Direct Club did more than anything is they just, they marketed directly to the consumer and they spoke to the consumer. And I think what is really different from that model from a traditional ortho model is when people go to that model, they're hearing words like retreat, limited treatment options, and not as expensive. And if someone goes to that route and then they go to an orthodontist, they typically still throw out that $6,000-$7,000 full treatment fee. and we're not hitting on those target words. And if somebody's comfortable doing retreats and marketing directly to retreats, this is a huge, this is the way you can possibly grow your practice in a time like this. So I think that you have to really target that market, because that's exactly what the direct-to-consumer brands have done. They don't go after adolescents. They don't go after difficult cases. They go after the low-hanging fruit of people. 70% of adults are retreats, so that's really the market they went after. And so I think that most adults think, well, I already had braces once. Why should I have to pay this full case fee if you can do a limited treatment case? So I think that some practices are really embracing that. And those are the practices, that are doing a little bit, better on their numbers right now.
Right. Yeah, we're going to be hitting on that quite a bit at our Nexus meeting in February 2024. So make sure to the audience that's listening to us today, make sure you check out that meeting and get registered for that meeting in February 24. Chris, I know that you're very closely affiliated with the AAO, and we just got off a round of one after another of those fall meetings that our industry has every year. So I think those were a little less attended this year, and just kind of would like to hear what you and the AAO are thinking about those fall meetings for the future.
Yeah, well, I'm not directly involved, but I am in contact with and have some knowledge of that the AAO realizes they have a problem with 8 constituent meetings, and it's difficult to pull that off. And so there is a committee that reports to the Board of Trustees that's critically looking at this. They're about more than halfway through their work. They promise an innovative, new, different approach to the regional meetings someday. Institutions move slow, but I think we can all expect, we're recording this on October 19th. The NISO meeting is in Montreal, just crossing the border and all those kinds of things. That's usually a softer meeting, and it is. We have the Southern and the Southwest together. Having meetings together has been kind of the prophylactic to totally changing it. But we're going to see a better situation. And so I think that'll mean better, speakers, clinical information, business information for the doctors and their team members. And I think it'll be a welcome blow to the vendors who really are having trouble justifying attending these meetings right now. So change is coming. The AAO is aware of it. Give the institution time to make that change. But I suspect by 25, we'll see something different.
That would be good. Yeah, I know the vendors, I hear a lot on the vendor side, and I know it is quite expensive to do all of those and a lot of time as well. So that's good to hear that some changes may be coming there. And so I would love to kind of wrap up. We've had some great discussion here. I'd love to kind of wrap up with a lightning round that doesn't have to be so lightning, because I think we've done pretty good on time today. Let's just kind of start with Shannon, and just kind of just your words to the industry that you'd like to leave with everyone.
Yeah, I think that, everyone's going to look at their financials, coming up towards the end of the year, and they're going to be looking to trim cost. And I would say a lot of times that bucket ends up being the marketing bucket. I would say, definitely don't do that. But I think that you're going to have meaningful marketing for the rest of the year and early next year. And I know just some best practices from being in practices regularly. I'm in a practice today, is, sometimes just looking at, who's this recession hitting the hardest? And you think about the service industries like teachers and police officers and firefighters. Those families tend to struggle a little bit more because, they're not those high income earners. But even thinking about, marketing directly to them and providing a discount could go a long way. Being involved more in the community, kind of honing back into your roots, can be very beneficial. So, I would kind of lead with that and just say that, think about how you're spending those marketing dollars and, what's meaningful and what's going to, get patients in the door, because that's going to be the challenge for the rest of the year. If consumers are delaying big purchase options, that's where you're going to feel it the most.
Love that, Shannon. I love the focus on teachers and those that are serving in our communities. That's fabulous. Oliver, what about you?
So rightfully we spend a lot of time on these metrics that matter calls, talking about trends and starts. I mean, that is the top line, and it should be the most important thing. One of the things we talked about with the student loans is also going to have an impact on patient delinquency, right? As soon as these loan payments start coming into the budget and adding up, and if anything increasing, you're going to start having some families making some hard choices about which ones they're going to pay. And we should expect that the patient AR delinquency is going to climb. It's already been ticking up a little bit, and we should expect it to climb. Now, what I want to make clear, though, is a lot of orthodontists out there and a lot of practice owners, they hear that information, and their instinctive response is to think that they should be tightening up their terms so that they can maintain or reduce delinquency. And what I will say is, remember all the other stuff we've been talking about in terms of the economy, in terms of patients' ability to pay and tightness and the impact it's already having on starts and conversion rate. So the opposite thing that you should be doing is to be tightening up your terms to try to control that one lever. As hard as it is to stomach, what you should be thinking is, I have to think more proactively about how to work more with patients to make it more affordable so that the patient monthlies are actually more digestible, more feasible, more affordable to fit in with all the other things that are coming in. And if you make patients feel that it's more affordable, they are more likely to pay. All of our data says so. Connected to that is the actual metric. So we call this metrics that matter, and everyone looks at their patient AR, I hope, and everyone looks at their insurance AR. One thing that we are exploring and have identified is that patient AR may in fact be underreported and underrepresented out there in the industry. And the reason why we believe that is that, at OrthoFi, because we are managing both parts of that puzzle, and because we have to keep things really well and tightly bucketed, when insurance fails, when there's an underpay, when there's a termination, we are very prompt about moving those balances over to the patient ledger. And so that insurance AR delinquency immediately becomes patient AR delinquency, and then we actively manage it there. A lot of practices out there are not that organized about shifting those balances. And so when you look at the gauge numbers and see a 2.7% insurance AR delinquency, I am very confident that at least 1 point of that is likely patient AR that's sitting in the wrong bucket. So the 3.2% patient AR delinquency is probably closer to 4% or 4.2%, and the insurance AR is probably lower than that. Now, in the end, your overall delinquency is the only number that matters. But if you knew that your patient AR was really above 4%, you'd probably be doing something different about it. And so in terms of metrics that matter, keep an eye on that, but don't do the wrong thing, right? Don't follow, your best instincts. I encourage you to save yourself from yourself.
That's such a great call out, Oliver. And I love, just reminding practices to make sure, they're looking at what bucket that should be sitting in so that they have a truer picture, but then also making sure that we're being flexible to help our payments match the monthly budget of the consumer. Right now, it's more important than ever with everything we've talked about, the student loan debt, just more important than ever to keep that affordable for the patient. Chris, we're going to let you bring us home today. We'd love to hear from you.
Great. Well, when there's a lot of news and not a lot of it's good, it's easy to get reactionary. And I think great leaders, a characteristics of them is they look longer term. And so also being the old guy on this thing, part of the advantage of doing this for 35 years is, we've been through this before, these kinds of, dips that we're going through right now economically. So, I think I would have you focus as an orthodontic leader of your team on the temporary aspect of what we're going through now. It will get better. The economy will get better. It's not great right now. And yeah, you have to make some maneuvers in the short term to do that. But you also have to think about where do I need to be investing for the future? And great leaders also have a really high emotional IQ. They understand kind of where their consumer is in response to the same thing that you're trying to understand. So, there's a lot of dysfunction in the United States right now. There's a lot of stuff going on in the world geopolitically right now. And I love what Shannon said about, your teachers, your firefighters, your policemen. Those are all government agencies that might get a pay increase once a year of 2 or 3%, maybe. I think, what could you do that identifies with them in your practice? Shannon gave you some ideas there. I think also just right now, people want to give, people want to help, and they feel good when they're helping somebody. Is there something to attract patients to say yes, where something goes back into the community, some kind of a causal marketing? I think you should maybe think about that. If you tie up on the short term, I've said this for 35 years, every year you should raise your fees. We creatively and somehow didn't talk about the word inflation on this call, but the reason we're down 3% in starts this year, but we're flat on collections, is because you raised your fees last year. So January 1st, you raise them again, and our inflation rate is going to be around 4%. You decide what you can stomach, but raise them 4% is my view, and you'll be able to spend next year what you spent this year. In the last part of next year, I really think it's going to get a lot better economically, and for the consumer. We'll get through the election, and we're going to have a nice run. So it's not all wet blanket. Be encouraged. If my kid wants to be an orthodontist, I'm doing that all day long. You're in the greatest space, I think, in serving other people and changing lives that there is.
Chris, we can always count on you to bring us up at the end, and we appreciate that, because there's a lot of bad news right now, but we are all in a really great industry and a great spot, and I know everyone on this call is so grateful for that, and our audience, just the reminder to be grateful for that as we enter the holiday season. Thank you to everyone who's joined us. Thank you, Chris and Shannon and Oliver, for your insights and your information on what's going on in our industry right now. And we will look for you guys again in about 3 months. Thank you.